Exactly 50 years ago, something special started in Bowden, Alberta. Since then, the Alberta Conference Camp meeting has touched many lives. And this year, we'd like to go back to how it all began. With the very first theme we had at Foothills Camp. We invite you to the 2023 Alberta Conference Camp meeting. Come join us to celebrate 50 years of moving by His Spirit.
Substituted this in, and all through the week, I don't know if you noticed, you might have, Elder Hosdell mentioned it in his talk yesterday about how there are things in our talks that seem to connect, from my talk to his talk. And then last night, what did Brother Eldon talk about? What was the big topic last night? Forgiveness. And remember what we were talking about with mind body? One of the things that I covered, one of the bullet points or the points I covered was about forgiveness. Now, obviously, he went through it in much deeper details, but I thought it was a great connection when we were talking about mind body, and forgiveness was one of those things that you should be doing. And then he talked all about it last night. So, I don't know, like Elder Hosel said, I think it's, none of us talked to each other. I didn't know what he was speaking about. Nobody knew what I was speaking about. It was all just, it seems like by chance, but I think it was really providential that somehow our topics all sort of interwove. So you sort of hear some there, and all of it it's sort of repetition, and it sort of reinforces all the things that we were saying. So I just thought that was really cool last night when I was sitting right over there, and Elder Eldon was talking about forgiveness. Like, oh wow, that is so cool. But yeah, it is a little. I don't know about you, but It's sad. I mean, like I said, I haven't been to a camp meeting in a long time, and so this is the first time that I've been to one since the pandemic, and it's really nice, being in person. And I didn't know. I think I only knew one person. Basically one or two people here before coming here, and now leaving. I feel like I know a lot more of you. It's really nice to see. There's a lot of Filipinos here, so I got to know a lot of Filipinos, but also everybody, especially those I've met after meetings or in between meetings, just talking with you. So I love to stay in touch. So if you all have my email, of course. I missed the talk on digital media, so I don't know what Elder Hazel said about digital media, but I do use Facebook and Instagram, mostly Facebook actually. And so if you're on Facebook, just look for me on there, Ernie Medina Jr., and feel free to connect. I have a rule on Facebook that I only accept friend requests from people who I've actually met in person. So, because I get a lot of friend requests from people that, I don't know, I've never heard from, I don't know who they are, and so I usually don't accept those. But if you send me a friend request and I recognize you, or you say, hey, I met you at Alberta Camp meeting, then I'll accept it. So I love to stay in touch with that way. I'm not one to post a lot about politics and that kind of thing. I usually post a lot on health. So if you want to keep up on like some of the latest health-related topics, then join me on Facebook, because I usually share things about health, sometimes on religion, especially if it's religion that ties in with health. I know sometimes, on Facebook, the two topics that you should be careful about posting are what? Politics and religion. And so, since my audience is pretty wide as far as who I connect with on social media, I try not to offend anybody, but at the same time, I do try to talk about religious topics as it seems fit, especially if it's related to health. So when we're talking about like Sabbath, for example, and Sabbath rest in the blue zones, that's very appropriate to talk about, at least on my page. And so I'd love to connect with you if you're on there or on Instagram, and we can keep in touch that way. So ending here this week, I'm going to be here all day Sabbath tomorrow, and I leave Sunday. So if you have any questions or you want to talk to me, you can feel free to catch me. I'll be done speaking, of course, but I'll be around. And also, it's sort of sad, that this is sort of the last, because I know a lot more people are going to come tomorrow that weren't here all week, right? So we're sort of like, we're all sort of like the special family. We've all been together here all week long, and then all of a sudden, all these people will come back again from last Sabbath. So this is sort of the last special time that we can be together. So it is a little sad for me. I'm going to be going back to the heat, the oven of California tomorrow, Sunday. So I will be always thinking about how nice and cool it was up here, even though some of you have told me, boy, it's getting really hot up here. To me, it's like, hot? This is awesome. Come down to Loma Linda when it's 102 degrees, and then we can talk about what's hot. So, all right. Well, we're going to talk about depression, and unfortunately, depression is one of the leading causes of disability in the U.S. and in Canada. And so we're going to talk about that today, this morning, and you'll see how all the things that we've tie into this as well, and then what things that you can do, what are some of the lifestyle things that you can do, all right? If you've ever suffered from depression or you know somebody who has, you are not alone. 20 million Americans suffer from depression, severe depression. I was trying to find some numbers on Canada, and I found this stat: 11% of men and 16% of women in Canada suffered from severe depression. 3 million teens suffer from depression. Do you think that rate is going up or down? It's going up. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think social media is a big driver of that, right, when it comes to our teens and kids. So that's the dark side of social media. And then there's, of course, milder forms of depression that is even more widespread. Now, there were some famous people in history that have suffered from depression. Here is Abraham Lincoln, one of the U.S. presidents, and he's quoted as saying, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would be not one cheerful face on the earth." That's sort of, that's pretty sad, huh? That he was that down. Winston Churchill was said to have battled the demon of depression for many years, almost fulfilling his father's prediction of a shabby, unhappy, and futile existence. But of course, we know both of these men did, great things. Unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, but in their life, in spite of the challenges of depression, they were able to progress on and move forward. And it just shows you the power of the mind and how resilient the mind is in spite of all of these different challenges. So I'm going to share a little bit with you a personal story, and this is another reason why I shared this, because of some recent things that have happened, and this really sort of came to my mind. But I'm just going to share with you this story because depression has really hit close to our home, okay, our family. This is, if you look in the picture there on the top left, is my brother, Chris. He's about 7 years younger than I am. And I was a student missionary in Japan, like I said, in like 85 to 86. He was a student missionary in Japan, I think it was like 86, 87, or 87, 88. I mean, he went after me. And the lady in the middle there is Akiko. Now, Akiko was the branch director of his English school in Kagoshima. Every English school in Japan had a branch director. And so that director was in charge of the student missionaries, in charge of the school. They speak very good English because, we didn't speak Japanese. So she was the branch director of his English school in Kagoshima. Kagoshima is way down south. So I was up in Tokyo. He was way down south. And then Okinawa, as you saw on the map, was even further down south, separate from the mainland. So they worked together there in Japan. And of course, as happens often with student missionaries, especially with male student missionaries from North America, they fall in love with somebody in Japan. I don't know if anybody's been to Japan or knows the Japanese cultures. I don't know, are there any Japanese people here? I don't think I've seen any Japanese. I've seen Filipino, I've seen Korean, but I've not seen any Japanese people. If you know anything about Japan, the women there are, they work hard in the kitchen. They're super homemakers, okay? They have a very distinct role. Japanese women take care of the kids, take care of the home. The man typically goes to work, earns the paycheck. When he gets home, he gives it to the wife who takes care of the money, and she controls how the money is spent. So she runs the household, she runs the kids' lives. So on the surface, it looks like the guy is the king. So the women treat the men just like kings in their own homes. They come home, they put on their slippers, they sit in the chair waiting for dinner. I had men business students who were my English students that said to me that they had never once stepped foot in the kitchen. Never. Because that's not their role. That's not their job. That's not what they're supposed to do. So, and most women, they're called shufus or housewives. That's their job. There's some, in the younger generation, they might be career-minded, but in general, most Japanese women, their goal is to find a good husband, then raise the kids, and all. So even though it looks like the man is the king of the house, really everybody knows that the woman is the one that's in charge. But they play their roles very well. So the woman is very subservient, if you will, to the male, but that's all for show, because it's really the woman is in charge. And so they do their roles very well. So you can imagine then when female women, like these directors, they meet us SM guys from America. Guess what we like to do? We'll go cook in the kitchen, we'll wash dishes, we'll help clean up. And to the Japanese women, that's like what? Wow, that is like amazing. A guy doing dishes? I did the dishes because that's where all the women were hanging out, all the female students. So I was doing the dishes, and they were so impressed. For Sabbath potluck, I learned I could make Special K loaf. Anybody know what that is? It's a traditional Adventist dish. So I would make Special K loaf because I could get all the ingredients in Tokyo, and I would bake this. And they would be like, "You cook?" So it's very easy. And then, of course, for the guys, for the American guys, the women are just falling all over themselves doing everything for you. And so it's like, wow, man, these Japanese women, they're really... So it happens a lot. A lot of SM, of course, obviously, we're told we're not supposed to date. We're not supposed to do that and all that. But there was a lot of undercover, dating kinds of things. My brother was really good. He was obedient. Obviously, feelings sprung up between the two of them. But they didn't officially date till after he was done working at the English school. And then he actually left, came back to America, went back to Andrews. But then shortly after that, he went back to Japan, left Andrews, went to an online college, and then he was working at another school there in Japan, not one of our church schools, Adventist schools. He was working there, and then he was openly dating and eventually marrying Akiko there in Japan. So he was there. He's been living there now for like over 30 years. So he's a Filipino-born American American who can't speak Tagalog but can speak Japanese. So he can preach in Japanese. He's very fluent in Japanese. And then, of course, you can see there they had two kids. Jonah on the bottom left there is the same age as my daughter, about 1 month younger than my daughter. So he's 26 now. And then Leah is like 23. And so they have two kids there in Japan. And so everything is going great. But unfortunately, Akiko had a challenge in her life. Ever since she had her kids, she had suffered from postpartum depression. And then on and off throughout her life, she would suffer and have challenges of depression. Now, here's the thing about Japan. What do you think their mental health services is like in Japan? Do you think they have a lot of psychology and psychiatrists? And no, why not? What is the culture of Japan like? Is what? Keep it to yourself, that's right. You don't show emotion. The Japanese typically, they don't show emotions. They're very stoic, right? You hide everything. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Because if you show any sign of weakness, that's not a good thing, right? So you can imagine mental health. That's all in your head. What is that? Just suck it up. And so it's even more so in Japan, because that's the culture, right? I mean, if you did something wrong and you brought shame on the family, or you made a big mistake, what was the common thing that they would do in Japan in the old days? Seppuku, a harikiri, right? You read in the paper sometimes, CEOs of company, they might not kill themselves, but they'll resign if something happens in their company, brings shame to the family. Suicide rate in Japan, among high schoolers is one of the highest in the world, because in Japan, the educational system is opposite here. High school is super hard in Japan because they're trying to get into a college, and if once they get into a college, the top colleges, then they have it easy because they know if they get to this college, like Tokyo University, for example, or University of Tokyo, they get in there, then they know they'll have the pick of the jobs anywhere. So getting in is the hard part. Once you're in, it's easy. Because I had college students as English students. They said, oh, college is easy. But the high school students, they were studying hard. They were having tutoring on Saturday and Sundays, taking extra classes. I mean, and if they didn't get into the college of their choice, a lot of times these poor high school students, graduates, would commit suicide because they didn't get into their college because it brought shame on the family. So can you imagine that kind of culture where, if you don't do everything right and perfect, that you bring shame, and shame is not good on the family? So she was battling mental health issues and depression on and off for years. We knew about it, but we didn't know the extent of it until about near the end of 2019, coming into 2020. We know things were getting really bad. So we thought, hey, you know what? Let's see if we can fly her here to go to a place called Weimar. How many of you have heard of Weimar? And then, most of you. Neil Nedley's program, Dr. Nedley's depression program there. He has an in-service program. So I remember looking online on the internet at his program and looking at the schedule, and here are some dates in March. This is March of 2020. And we're looking at, there's some 10-day sessions that we'll fly her here. We said my mom would fly her here to the States, enroll her in this thing, and then hopefully she can get the help that she needs. So this is January of 2020. Unfortunately, of course, the world was already starting to be in the pandemic, and in Japan, it had started there sooner than it was here. They were already locking down in Japan. So we thought, we might have a hard time getting her out. Let's see, can we get her out before everything shuts down? February of 2020, we get a phone call, and we find out that Akiko passed away. She ended up committing suicide. And we were all just devastated. We were like, what? Here we were trying to get her to come to the States to get treatment, and we were about ready to buy the ticket and all this, and we were just all in shock. We were like, you got to be kidding me, because we had just talked to her not too long ago when we were trying to make all these arrangements. So it was that's the first and only time in my family and immediate family, among my siblings and even extended relatives, on my mom's side and my dad's side of the family, that anybody's ever committed suicide. And, it made us really grapple with a lot of the different things about the ethics, the theology. I always kept going back to Samson, right? Because Samson committed suicide, basically, in a sense, right? So, we were really struggling with that. And unfortunately for my brother, my brother and my youngest sister take a lot after our dad. My other sister, who's a year younger than I am, and myself, we take after our mom. So my mom was always the one that is up front, talking, presenting. She's the extrovert, although my sister says she's not. And then our two younger siblings are like our dad, more quiet, more introspective, more emotional. And we knew my brother, he was going deep, deep down, because at that time then, everything was shutting down. He was stuck at home, couldn't go to work. He was working from home. He's a teacher. He's a professor at Kagoshima University. The kids, Jonah was up in Tokyo. He was stuck there. His daughter, Akiko, was there, so at least he had his daughter with him. But he was basically stuck at home, disconnected from everybody except for our WhatsApp group. We have a family WhatsApp group. So my mom and my siblings, and we were messaging with him like every hour, it seemed like. But we knew we couldn't help him that well from afar, especially when it's family. It's hard to help family in these situations. And so fortunately, this was one thing that was very providential, that I have a colleague at Loma Linda who works in the School of Behavioral Health, and he's a clinical psychologist. His expertise is in grief. And I said, hey, Adam, do you guys do like online Zooming coaching or counseling? And how much is that? And how can you do this? Oh, no, I'll do it for free as a faculty community service. And so for the next 2 years, Adam and Chris would Zoom every Friday afternoon, Zoom for counseling for the next 2 years over the pandemic. And we really believe that literally saved his life. Because if it hadn't been for him, we couldn't do much from our place. We were praying, of course, but my brother tends to get really just inside his head and just go down, 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 down. I mean, he really churns things over and in. So Adam literally kept him a lifeline, all those. And on February is a tough month because that's Akiko's birthday, that's their anniversary, it's Valentine's Day, and it's the day of her death. So every February they do extra sessions because he just needs that. So this was a really tough hit on their family and on our family, and I'll tell you more about that story. But that was where we really, really learned about the dark side of depression and what happens if you don't get treatment and get help for that. Okay, so Neil Nedley is the president of Weimar University, as some of you know, and he wrote this book, Depression: The Way Out. I wish I had read that book before, but Depression: The Way Out. And he has a program. This is the program that I was looking for when we were researching to bring Akiko here to the U.S. You can just Google this; it's online there, and they have different programs. Now, I don't remember seeing an online program when I searched for this. All I knew was the residential programs where they go there and they live there. And I think there was somebody here, at least somebody talked to me yesterday, that they actually brought a family member there to the residential program, so they went through that whole program themselves. So there's somebody here that has actually experienced this depression program. Okay, so, and there's actually, if you go on their website, there's actually a quiz that you can take to sort of see if you've been thinking, am I, having some depression issues, or somebody I know. So you can go online. It's a free quiz, and it's basically this. So if you don't have access to online, and I know it's probably too small to read, but it's just 9 questions that you answer. So I did the quiz online the other night. I scored a 0, so I was like, okay, I guess I'm not depressed. Well, I'm a little sad that I'm leaving here soon, but I'm not depressed based on this quiz. And so you can do it either online or on paper. If you want this quiz, the paper version, I can send it to you. But once you answer those questions, it will give you a score. So you can see there, 0 to 4 is none to minimal, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, mild, moderate, moderately severe, and then severe. Okay? Now, as you can see there in the bold, your score does not provide a diagnosis of depression. So don't use this as a diagnostic tool. This is what we call a screening tool. But it should be, it's a first step you can do to sort of see, hey, do I need to, have further help or do something? But this is not a diagnostic tool. So we always recommend, if you do think you might need help, just like I got help from my brother, because I'm not a clinical psychologist, right? I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not even a marriage family counselor. I'm a certified wellness coach, but that's very different. Coaching and counseling are two very different things. So I know I'm not any of this, so that's why we reached out to professionals to help my brother, because we did not want to mess with this. My mom's a physician, but this is not her specialty. She's not a psychiatrist. So we said none of us wanted to touch this, and so we said we got to find somebody. Again, like I said, fortunately, Adam was available. And it was really cool. My brother came to the U.S. last August for the first time since the pandemic, because he was stuck there, right? So he came back, and when he came to California, he got to meet Adam in person for the first time, because they'd never met before. And can you imagine what that kind of meeting was like? Both of them were crying, because, again, Chris knew he literally saved his life. And then my mom and us, we all met. We were all crying, kind of thing, and joyful tears, of course. So, but, get a specialist, get somebody that can help you with these things. Now, having said that, there are a lot of things that you can do to deal with depression. And this is what Nedley's program is based on. So it's a matter of identifying and targeting some of these factors that people have, that they found that are in people who suffer from depression. And Dr. Nedley puts it in 10 categories. When he did the research on this, he actually found like over 100 different markers or things that happen in people's lives that could lead to depression. But then he realized, well, you can't have over 100 things. Then he actually saw that they could be grouped into these 10 different things. And I'm just going to go quickly through these 10 different things just to sort of give you an idea of what they represent. Number one is genetics. And so if you have a family history of depression or suicide in a first-degree relative, okay, that's genetics. Number two is developmental. So early puberty in girls, beginning menstruation by age 11 or younger, history of depression in adolescence, not being raised by both biological parents, sexual abuse, and being raised or living with someone who is an alcoholic or a drug addict. Okay? So if you know of kids or somebody that has in that kind of situation growing up, sometimes we also call those ACE. Have you heard of ACE? ACE? What's the A? Childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences. Okay? Traumatic experience as a child. That is a hit category for depression. It doesn't mean they're going to get depressed, but it is a factor. Okay? Number three, lifestyle. Not regular exercise. Not regularly exposed to daylight or a medical grade light box for at least 30 minutes a day, and rarely breathing fresh air. Okay? Circadian rhythm. Regular insomnia, routinely sleeping so either you can't fall asleep, or you're sleeping for more than 9 hours a day, or less than 6 hours a day, so either too much or too little, or you do not have regular hours for sleeping and eating. Okay, that's your circadian rhythm. Addictions, use of alcohol, cigarette, tobacco, heavy caffeine use, recreational drug use, daily use of benzodiazepines or chronic narcotic use for more than 30 consecutive days. Okay? Nutrition, low dietary tryptophan. What is tryptophan? It's a what? Tryptophan is an amino acid. It's a protein. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about tryptophan. Low omega-3 fatty intake, low folic acid, low vitamin B intake, diet high in cholesterol, saturated fat, and sugar, and marked anorexia and weight loss. Toxic, high lead levels, high mercury levels. That's why I said yesterday, I love my sashimi, my fish, but I'm trying to cut back because I know the mercury levels are going up and up and up in fish, so I've cut back on that a lot. High arsenic, bismuth, or other toxin levels, or high risk of exposure to these toxins. Social or complicated stress or grief, absence of social support, negative or stressful life events, low social class, being raised by grandparents. I don't know why I've heard some good stories about grandparents raising them, but that's what he says here. This is Dr. Nedley. An immediate family member being an alcoholic or a drug addict. There's a scale called the Ray-Holmes scale. Have you heard of that? The Ray-Holmes scale, it sort of lists like life events. And the top 10 typically are doing with family like divorce, death of a spouse. Actually, marriage is up there as well because, even though that's a positive stress, right, getting married, hopefully, for most people, it's still a very stressful time, right? So a lot of life events are up there in the top life stressors. And then medical conditions, hepatitis C, recent head injury, stroke, heart disease, terminal cancer, Parkinson's disease, uncontrolled diabetes, severe postpartum stress. That's what, unfortunately, Akiko suffered from. Premenstrual tension syndromes, inadequately treated thyroid disease, lupus, inadequately treated adrenal gland disease. I would also think they probably would add on also chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. I've worked with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia support groups in our clinic, and I'll tell you that's a really tough thing. I don't know. I think I met one person here that says that they have chronic fatigue, and it's challenging because a lot of doctors don't even believe it exists. I think it's better now, but back in the early when we first started the support group, this was back like in the late 1990s, early 2000, and I still had doctors tell me, yeah, I'm setting them to your support group because I really don't know what I can do for them anyway, and it's just all in their head, so I can't do anything. So they didn't even really believe it themselves. So can you imagine when you're suffering from something like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia and your own doctor says you're just making it up? I mean, how would you feel? Depressed, right? I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, my doctor doesn't believe in it. How am I going to get help? So I think that would be a list on the medical condition. And then the last one there, I thought that was really interesting. Frontal lobe. I thought, how is frontal lobe a category for depression? Well, we talked about it yesterday a little bit, right? What happens here in the frontal lobe when it comes to attitude of gratitude and perceptions and stress management? all your emotions, right? Your conscience, your decision, yes, all those things. That all happens here in the frontal lobe. So here are some things that Dr. Nedley says are indicators of frontal lobe if you have these things happening dealing with the frontal lobe. On a low-carb diet, on a high meat or high cheese diet, or eating lots of rich food, entertainment, TV or movie addiction, entertainment, internet or chat internet addiction, regular exposure to syncopated rhythm music and or videos. I was like, ooh, I have to read more about that because I don't know what metronome beat that would be. But he said syncopated rhythm and videos, conscious suppression of frontal lobe activity, lack of regular abstract thinking, acting against one's conscience or known value system. So again, you're consciously going against what you know is right. So he said this, if you have to have 4 or more of these categories for depression to be manifested. So if you don't have 4 or more, your chance of suffering from depression are very low. Okay? Now, if you look at that list, he says there are only 2 of those that we can't do a whole lot about, right? We can't change our genetics, and we can't change how we grew up in the past, right? But how many do you need to have depression? 4. So if you're unfortunate enough to have 2 of those, you have a family relative who died of suicide, and you grew up in a really tough childhood situation, well, that's 2 right there, but you still need 2 more. So all the other 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, those are all things that we can do something about, right? So you can do and reduce your risk in the other 8 areas, okay? So don't worry or fret or get stressed out about 1 or 2 because there's nothing we can do about it, okay? But we can do something about the other 8, and that's the good news. That's the hope that you can show people who might be suffering from depression because they might think, well, it's genetic, there's nothing I can do about it. No, show them this is what the literature, this is what one of the best depression programs out there is doing, is they are focusing on the 8 and just reassuring people, hey, don't worry about the other 2. So that's the good news, okay? Now, Dr. Rady, I talked about that, right, on exercise when we talked about the Spark book, but he said this, depression is an erosion of connections. Remember we talked about the neurons, okay, the neuron connections? Erosion of connections in your life as well as between your brain cells. New nerve cells are born in the brain how often? Every day. Remember what I said on Tuesday? I was taught what? We didn't make new brain cells. Now they're saying, yes, we can make brain cells every day and even in the areas affected by depression. Okay, so there is definitely hope. Positive lifestyle choices encourage new nerve cell growth, increased connections, okay, improved nerve cell survival. Okay, these are positive lifestyle changes. And of course, exercise, like I said, is a big thing because what is the thing that exercise secretes in the brain? This is a little quiz. Oh, it was a 4-letter protein. Close. You're 1 letter off. The first letter. B. Did you guys all not? Oh, I know some of you were here Tuesday, right? B. D. BDNF. Yes. BDNF. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So when you exercise, you release this chemical, this protein in the brain, and it helps to do all those things. New nerve cell growth, increased connections, all that. So BDNF is that key chemical. But other lifestyle changes can also help do those things as well. So nutrition and lifestyle, physical, mental, exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep. We'll talk more about that, but that was in Dr. Rady's User's Guide to the Brain. Okay, dietary factors. They help put the brakes on self-destructive cellular activity. So, if there's anything going on, it will help to protect your brain from deteriorating. It will release antioxidants. Remember we talked about that yesterday? What are antioxidants? What do they help fight against? Free radicals, right. And so free radicals are cruising in your brain. They're like those little Pac-Man, and they're eating up good DNA and good cells. So antioxidants helps to make those free radicals happy again, right? By giving those free radicals what? What does the antioxidant give them? The free radical is missing what? Why is he radical? Why is that oxygen molecule a radical? He's missing what? An electron. He's missing an electron. So that, because they have two electrons, an oxygen molecule has two electrons. So the free radical, he's missing one of them. So he's going around trying to steal another one to replace it, and antioxidants replaces that missing electron. So now he's happy again. All right? So that's why when you have the right diet and exercise, you release and bring in more antioxidants, and we talked about that yesterday. Providing proteins, building blocks. Again, that protein, the main protein that we just mentioned was BDNF. Okay? So, nutrition interventions may benefit psychiatric conditions and countless aspects of human well-being. I was just reading last night when I was reviewing for this that they are now considering nutrition as a major intervention in treating depression. Before, their main focus was just giving the patient what? Medicine, drugs, drugging them. Now they're looking at the lifestyle, especially the power of nutrition. So that's good. Fighting carbs with carbs, plant fiber-rich meals, more raw fruits and vegetables, focusing on legumes and beans and whole grains. I mean, we've mentioned this all throughout. Nuts, olives, avocados, olive oil. And these are the plants that you can find that are high in tryptophan. Tryptophan is an amino acid, like I said, and it helps you. Tryptophan is the core amino acid that helps you to make what brain chemical in the brain? No? Oh, I heard it, serotonin. What is the brain chemical serotonin for? It makes you feel what? Happy? There's another word I was thinking about. If you get a lot of tryptophan and you get a lot of serotonin in your brain, really a lot of serotonin in your brain, you're going to feel what? Sleepy. It makes you so relaxed you fall asleep. Now, for those of you who still eat turkey, okay, on our I know your Thanksgiving is, when's your Thanksgiving here in Canada? Is it in October? Okay, so yours is in October, ours in November. So a typical American Thanksgiving meal, non-vegetarian, it would be like turkey and mashed potatoes and that kind of thing. So when you combine and turkey is very high in tryptophan, right? So you combine turkey with a carb, mashed potatoes, the carb allows the tryptophan to get in the brain. Because here's the thing, tryptophan is the base molecule needed, the base ingredient needed for serotonin. Serotonin is the chemical in your brain that helps you to feel calm and relaxed. When you're under a lot of stress, you're worrying or stressing out, guess what your brain is using a lot of? Serotonin. It's burning it up faster. So your serotonin levels start to drop. Then your body says, we need to eat more tryptophan to replenish the serotonin levels, right? So it causes cravings in you. But if you think about it, what are most people typically craving when they're under a lot of stress? Do they go out and get turkey or turkey jerky or something? Sweets, carbs. Why do you think the brain causes you to crave carbs when you really need tryptophan to come in your brain to replenish your serotonin? Well, here's the interesting thing. Tryptophan is part of the amino acid, one of about like 21 amino acids from protein, right? But tryptophan is a really small, minor amino acid among the other amino acids. So when you eat something let's say you eat something with protein in it, turkey, whatever, and it goes into your system, the amino acids get digested, they go out into the system, they travel then in the blood to your brain. Now, what is covering your brain? What is around your brain? It's called the blood-brain barrier. There's a protective thing that before any blood can get into your brain, it has to go through the blood-brain barrier. It's sort of like, we're in California. If we want to go to Mexico, or people come from Mexico want to come to the U.S., they have to go through what? The Border Patrol on the freeway, right? They have to come through that. So that is like the Border Patrol to the brain. It monitors, it checks, it makes sure anything coming into the brain is safe, is allowable, it's legal, it's good for the brain to come in. So that's what the blood-brain barrier is. It's a protective covering, of protective wall or shield around the brain. So tryptophan, being a minor amino acid, it's like one little car trying to get through the checkpoint, but there's all these other amino acids that are in the way, blocking it, so tryptophan can't get in as much as it would like to get in the brain. However, if you eat the turkey with the mashed potatoes, a carb with the protein, combine it together, and you eat it, the body does something very interesting. It will, while those amino acids are traveling there, the carbohydrates somehow open up the doors along the way to like muscle cells, and it will allow the amino acids to go into those other cells, and all the amino acids, as they're traveling to the brain, are getting shunted off to other places, except for one amino acid. Which one is left alone to travel freely on the path to the brain? Tryptophan. So by the time they get to the blood-brain barrier, the checkpoint, guess what? Now most of the cars are tryptophan because the competition has been shunted off thanks to the carbohydrates to go into the body. So now when it gets to the brain, tryptophan can get in, gets to the brain, then the brain can make more serotonin, your serotonin levels go up, and you feel calm, relaxed, sleepy. So after you eat that big turkey meal, what do most people do after eating especially that meal? If they don't go for a walk, they go for a nap, okay? That's because the serotonin levels have gone up. So isn't that sort of interesting how the body works there? So when you want, now you obviously you don't have to eat turkey. I gave you a list here of some of the foods that are plant-based foods that are high in tryptophan. So if you want to increase your serotonin levels, you want to try to consume foods that are high in tryptophan because that is the base ingredient for serotonin in the brain, okay? So, and then if you're eating that, the potatoes on there, but if you can eat that together with a carbohydrate, then that would be fine. But these are foods that are high in the tryptophan. So, speaking of sleeping and falling asleep, rest is a big factor when it comes to depression. Now, we saw that a sign of depression was either sleeping too much or not enough, but you want to think about getting into a good sleep habit routine. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it more today because this is the recommendation for the hours of sleep based on your age. So if you can see there, like I am 58, so for me, I'm right there. So it says 7 to 9 hours for me. So I was talking to some people yesterday, and one of the goals in my afternoon group, one of the participants said she wanted to try to get to bed by 10 o'clock. That was her goal, because she's usually going to bed by midnight and then getting up early. So they're getting less than 6 hours of sleep. So for our age category, for most of us here, 7 to 8 hours of sleep is what we need to get, okay? And I know for myself, if I wake up with the sun. I don't need an alarm clock. So when it gets bright outside, I wake up. And so I know if sunrise is around 5:30, 6 o'clock, it starts to get light. That means I need to be in bed and sleeping at the latest by 11 o'clock, 10:30. And so that's a goal I'm working on for myself because I'm especially when sunset is at 9:30, 10 o'clock, right? Last night I was still talking to people outside at 9:30, after the meeting. So it was getting to bed that early was going to be tough. All right, so now here's the other reason why it is so important to get a good quality sleep. In our brain makes waste. Did you know that? Why does our brain make waste products? Toxins. Why does our brain make that? Where do toxins in the body come from anyway? Oh, say again? From the blood? Well, it can come from the environment and go inside, but what about our own body making toxins itself? Our body produces toxin. Think of a car engine, a 4-cycle engine. Fuel is what? What are the 2 fuels that you need to make a car engine go? Gasoline and air. So every cell in our body that's functioning, you have a cell, you have the mitochondria, that is like a 4-cycle engine. It requires fuel, i.e. glucose, sugar, and it requires oxygen. So every cell in your body is like a little 4-cycle engine. So when it's producing energy and doing work, it also is then producing what? Waste, exhaust, toxin. So our bodies, that's normal. It's designed to do that. So guess what is the most metabolically active engine in your whole body? What's the one that does the most work? The most active? Liver, heart, the brain. Just think about it. The brain is doing, we barely understand how the brain functions, right? The brain, how do memories work? The brain is such an amazing organ. Yeah, heart is important, but the heart is just a muscle. It's just sort of brute strength. It's just a pump, right? It's just a pump, and it has one thing: keep pumping, and keep pumping millions of beats for our lifetime. But the brain is thinking, it's conscious, it's all of this stuff. How do you do that? So you can imagine the brain cells are really, really active. They're really producing a lot of toxins because they're very active. And also the brain cell is the only cell in the body that I know of, as far as I know, only cell in the body that does not need this. What is this? What? Insulin. Very good. Does not need insulin to unlock the cell doors to let sugar go in. Can you imagine if your brain cells were able to get insulin resistant like our other cells in our body? What would happen if then insulin was needed in the brain and then sugar couldn't get in your brain, which needs fuel? What would happen to your brain function? Oh, that would be horrendous to think about. A diabetic having insulin resistance in their head, they would have all kinds of problems. So brain cells do not require insulin to open up the doors. So sugar can go in there all the time because it has to, because brain cells are super, super active, okay? But insulin resistance happens in the rest of our body. So very active, which means it's producing toxins. So guess how the brain gets rid of these toxins. If you look in the brain here, you look at the brain that's the awake brain. So you see the blue lines, and those are the blood vessels in the brain, and you see a lot of black. But then look at the brain that's asleep. Do you see the red stuff out there, outside of that blue line? There's another system called the glial system, or the lymphatic system in the brain, that it's basically the drainage waste system in the brain. And so that opens up while you are sleeping, and that allows the brain to flush out all the day's toxins. So right now, you're producing toxins in your brain. Normally, that's fine. Don't freak out. You're producing toxins in your brain. Unless you're brain dead, then you're not. No, everybody's alive here. I can see you all looking and smiling. But your brain is producing toxins, and they're stored up in the brain there. And then at night when we sleep, the trash lines open up. The lymphatic system opens up, flushes out all those toxins, and then it clears out the toxins for the day. What happens if you're not getting enough sleep and those toxins are building up day after day after day after day? What's going to happen? You're going to have all those toxins built up, and you're going to have problems. Have you seen stories about, I don't know if it happens here in Canada, but I've seen sometimes stories in New York City, the unions that do the trash pickup, they go on strike, right? So they don't pick up trash for weeks. So what happens to the trash? Piles up on the sidewalks, in the streets, and when you have a lot of trash in the streets and the sidewalks, what does that attract? A lot of rats. And I hear you have no rats here in Alberta, which just totally amazes me that you don't have any rats in Alberta. But, but the rats will come out, and they'll be all over, and then rats pass on disease, and all this. So can you imagine then what happens if all those toxins are in your brain day after day, because you're cutting yourself short on sleep, you're not getting enough sleep to clean out the trash, so all those toxins are building up. And what does toxins lead to in the brain? Cognitive dysfunction, right? What was the bacteria that I talked about yesterday that causes me to floss? That P. gingivalis, that bacteria goes to the brain. It's a neurotoxin. So here your brain's producing toxins, neurotoxins, and you got to sleep to flush that out. So that's why sleep and lack of sleep is a really key contributor or factor in cognitive problems as well as depression. Okay, so I always remind myself that when I see myself, oh man, I need to start getting to bed sooner because I can think about my trash building up in my brain. Okay, so that system only works, this lymphatic system only works during the night while you're sleeping. It doesn't work while you're sitting here awake. Okay, so some things that you can do for your sleep, if you have trouble sleeping, stick to a schedule. Okay, stick to a schedule even on the weekends. I know I have some friends who will get up early to work during the week, then they say, oh, the weekend, I can sleep in. That makes it more difficult. So you want to stick to a schedule. I wake up the same time every day, pretty much every day. So stick to a schedule, and then practice a ritual, some kind of ritual. So I think I said it yesterday in my afternoon group, but one of my rituals for sleep is I like to take a warm shower before I go to bed. Okay, that relaxes me. I know somebody else, Dr. Noval, I talked about her yesterday. She likes to do a warm shower, stretching exercises, and then she said she does like essential oil in a little diffuser, and I think she uses lavender or something. That's her ritual for going into bed. My mom likes to read her Bible. She has a little desk by her bed, so she'll be reading her Bible before she goes to bed. So everybody, come up with a ritual that you can do all the time, because then that gets your brain into the mode like, oh, it's time to go to sleep. Okay, exercise daily. Now you want to finish 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. Don't exercise like right up to that, which makes it difficult because I love to play. What's that game again? Oh yeah, pickleball. That's right. Yeah, some of you may have heard of it. And in California, it's super hot right now. So we're starting to play pickleball at like 6 or 6:30, 7 o'clock even, because it's still blazing hot there. And so we'll play from 7 to 9:30, almost 10 o'clock. How's that going to be for when I go to bed, when I go home? By the time I leave the gym, we're talking in the parking lot, I get home, shower. It's already almost midnight. And I'm still, after playing, how do you think I feel? I feel wired. I feel energized. So I'm not ready to go to sleep. So I've had to make the tough sacrifice and cut back and say, okay, I got to leave the courts by 8:30. If I don't leave by 8:30, I'm not going to get to sleep in time. So the summertime, it makes it tough. I usually do it more in the morning when it's cool, and then I don't even show up. Because if I show up at night, then I'm tempted to stay till 9:30. So people say, hey, where are you? We haven't seen you in months. I say, well, I'm playing, but it's just in the morning. So you got to change that exercising. So don't do anything active just before you go to bed. Okay? Evaluate your bedroom temperature. What kind of temperature do you think is best for sleeping in? Cool. That's right. Now, my wife does not like cool. She likes hot, and I like cold. And so we're always, I've been tempted to get one of those beds that half of it is hot, half of it is cold. Have you seen that? Temperature control beds. We recently got a new thermostat, a new AC, and it has an app. And so every time I'm going upstairs, I'll pass the thermostat on the bottom, and I'll see it set to, like 78, 79. And it's like, oh my word, that's so hot. So I'll get upstairs. Oh, is that what you like? You like it hotter? Okay, so she likes it at that temperature. So I'll go to the bed. Then when I get in bed, I go on the app and I jack it down to like 70, whatever. And I hope she doesn't notice because she's already upstairs. And I don't think she has the app on her phone. So the thermostat's always going up and down, up and down. So it's a struggle to have a cool. But yeah, cool is best. You sleep better. It's better for your sleep. Sound, of course, quiet, or you could have white noise. I was talking to somebody yesterday about sleep and having trouble getting sleep. So, there are those things that have like the rain or a river or ocean sounds or, maybe light music or something. But nature sounds, I heard, were really good to help you get into that sleeping mode. And then how much light should you have in the room? None. Zero. Not even a night light should be there, because a night light, any kind of light in your room will trigger your sensors in your retina, and it'll mess up. It'll think like you should be getting up or something. So if you have windows and there's when I was in a dorm, I had a window right in front of my head at my bed, and right outside was the street light. I mean, it was super bright coming into it was like a spotlight on my head. So I had to get something to put on the window to block it at night. So it's got to be dark, cool, quiet, or some light nature sounds. That's the best for getting yourself to go into sleep. Okay? We already talked about tryptophan, protecting your REM sleep. That's that cycle of sleep where you get the deep sleep. So don't do all-nighters, alcohol, caffeine. And then This is the last bullet point. I almost took it off because, I had to practice what I preach. But I'm just confessing with you up here, just so transparency. That is my hardest bullet point that I do for myself because, this thing is, I like to check messages and message people, but I do have this feature on my phone. This is an iPhone, and it has a feature that about 9 o'clock, it shifts and it turns the blue light off. So everything looks sort of yellowish on my phone. So it's sort of tough, though, when I take a picture, then people are looking at my picture, and they're like, ooh, why is it so yellow? Because the blue light turned off. So at least my phone turns off the blue light, but ideally, you shouldn't even have your phone by your bed. But I always say, oh, well, what if our daughter calls and she needs us or something? She's living on her own. So anyway, I'm still struggling with that myself. They say keep it in another room, and I haven't gotten quite to that point yet. So I'm still working on that. But at least the blue light is off, okay? And that's, again, why you shouldn't be watching TV, watching TV in bed or anything like that, because the blue light from the TV screen or the computer screen is going to mess up your circadian rhythm and all of that, okay? So here are just some things, again, that help you with sleep. Just to reiterate there, this one here, don't eat late at night. I know a lot of people now who are doing intermittent fasting, so we're stopping eating right. I'm not trying to eat anything at past 6 o'clock. That's for me my cutoff. So if I go play pickleball and I don't eat before I go, that's a little tough. So I try to eat at least an apple or something, a little something before I go play, because when I get home at 8 or 8:30, I don't want to be eating that at that time of night. So not eating late is a good thing, okay? Exercise, again, we talked about the benefits of exercise. This is Dr. Rady, and exercise is not an instant cure, but over time, it can really help to clean out, improve BDNF, grow new brain cells, and help to fight depression. And it's a process, okay? So at its core, depression is defined by the absence of moving towards anything. And so this is where we talked about mind-body, where if you focus on the positive, if you have purpose, like the people in the blue zones, that is going to help your brain to be more active and less stuck in the mud kind of thing, and will give more positive signals versus negative, and exercising can help to do that. Social and environmental, changing your thinking. We talked a lot about this yesterday, right? In the mind-body, about how to choose your thought patterns and change your thinking, changing your negative thoughts. Remember I talked about my dad and how he talked to me about tennis and how I did I say that this in the morning group? Because sometimes what I do in the morning is different from the afternoon. Did I mention that? My dad in tennis? That story? No? When I was growing up, in the afternoon? Well, I'll say it again here for those in the morning. When I was growing up, my dad taught me tennis. We didn't know pickleball back then. And finally, when he taught me, I finally beat him 6-4, 6-4. And I was so excited. Yes, I finally beat Dad. And then he said, but you know what he said to me? He said, well, if you had been serving better, you could have beat me 6-2, 6-2. I'm like, what? Is that all you can say? My dad's way, and I'll make this the Reader's Digest, he did not like to praise us because he thought if he praised us, then we would get soft and lazy. So he would always say something to sort of push us, but in my mind, I just heard negativity. So it took me a long time, literally, to change my thinking, because every time I did something, I would automatically think negative about it, and then I realized that came from my dad early on, and eventually, when we were older, we asked our mom, why is Dad like that? Why does he never, praise us? He goes, oh, because he's really proud of you, but this is his way of pushing you, but he really is proud of you. So now when we were older, before he passed, we said to Dad, yeah, Dad, we knew what you were doing now, so it's okay. We forgive you. It's like, and all that. But my mom was very nurturing and supporting, so that helped. But that's where sometimes a lot of our root of our negative thinking comes from, is from somebody in our past. So focusing on solutions rather than problems, thinking on the positive, doing the positivity journal we talked about yesterday. And so don't focus on these things, because if you focus on those things, your brain is automatically going to go to those things. And then if you have some of those other categories for depression, that's an easy spiral down to that rabbit hole. So you really need to make an effort to focus on the positive, whether that's keeping that journal that Elder Hazel had and writing those, how many things a day at night? 3 positive things unique to that day, okay? And doing that. that will help you to think more positive. Healing takes place with time and perseverance. Again, that intentional choice. Today's choices yields tomorrow's gifts. Healing brain body systems that are stuck in a rut. So just have some things here for Psalms as we end here. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. And then this one, of course, very famous one. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. 1 Peter 5:7. And so let me give the ending of that story that I started out with. My brother made it through the pandemic. And as you can see here, this was on July 7, 2023. So just not too long ago, I was in Michigan. This is in Michigan, near Berrien Springs, Michigan. Actually, I think it was in, anyways, it was just outside of Berrien Springs at somebody's home. But my brother was stuck in, like I said, in Japan for over 2 years during the pandemic. Last August, 2022, he came to California, then he came to Michigan. He was just coming home to just have relief. It was his first time back. He wanted to be with family, reconnect with his academy and college friends back there at Andrews. So that was all. He was just coming back. He was a little bit depressed because as a teacher in Japan, mandatory retirement is 60. He's like 53. So he's thinking, oh man, I'm stuck here for 7 more years. His prospect of finding another wife there in Japan, virtually zero. Because remember, he only got together with Akiko because why? She was the branch director of his school, so they worked together every day. But typically in Japan, they're not really big on mixed marriages, right? So they're very, very only Japanese to Japanese. Filipinos will marry anybody. Doesn't matter. You could come from Mars, probably have a relative who's married to a Martian. Okay, so we're very open. But Japanese are not. So he knew he was stuck there for 7 years alone, from no spouse, in a job that just reminds him every day of what happened. I won't go into details about her suicide, but anyway, a reminder. So he was sort of depressed about that. So I'm going to come back to the U.S., just get away, break. I was here for like 3 weeks. I was in California for a little bit. Then he came to Michigan. He was in Michigan at my mom's house for about 1.5, barely 2 weeks in Michigan. And in that span of time, and this is all providential, we believe, because nothing was planned. Got to Michigan. His former classmate from academy has a computer company that does camp management software system, and they offered him a full-time job with benefits, and that allowed him to then leave his job in Japan because he could leave early before retirement, right? So he got a job, and not only that, at a class reunion early on, he got reconnected with this lady here, his classmate, named Yvonne. Now, Yvonne was a classmate. She was married to another classmate, but then they got divorced about 12, 13 years ago. She has 3 kids. 1 just got married in November, and 2 are still in college. And so she's the registrar at Andrews Academy, so she's living there, been there for a long time. They've been classmates since the 80s, right? They were in academy together. So they were friends, but nothing special. And during the pandemic, she did keep in touch with him, via social media and all. But again, nothing special at all. So they got together. They met up at a reunion, a get together. And that evening, Chris was saying, "Yeah, I'm going to go to the county fair in Berrien Springs. If you've been to Berrien Springs, the county fair is like a big event, right?" So he said, "I'm going to the county fair by myself." So Yvonne said, "Oh, do you want some company?" Again, nothing romantic, but she just didn't want to go by himself. And she even said this. She said, "Oh, and by the way, do not buy my ticket because this is not a date." She said that. "I will buy my own ticket," and he says, "Okay, that's cool. And so, and here's the other thing that shows that when you look back, it was really providential. That week that Chris was back in Berrien, she was supposed to be on a cruise with her family. But then somebody got sick in the family, and then they had to postpone the cruise to later that summer, and that was the week that Chris was there. But because school at Andrews Academy had started, she couldn't go on the cruise. So she was sort of depressed and moping at home, saying, "Oh man, my kids, my dad, my family, my sisters, they're all on this wonderful cruise, and I'm stuck here back home working." Okay? So she wasn't supposed to be there until that cruise got delayed. So she goes to the county fair with Chris. Again, there's not a date, but as things happen, they end up staying there till closing, just talking. Then they leave there, and they at like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, they go to St. Joe to the pier, and they're talking some more, past midnight. Again, just talking, just sharing, And then the next night, they do that again. And then the next night, they do that again. By this time, it's about the fourth night, my mom's texting to us, and we have maybe I shouldn't say because my brother might not know this and he might see this. We have a WhatsApp group that is just my mom and kids 1, 2, and 4. It's missing number 3, Chris. So we were talking, and my mom was saying, hey, Chris isn't home yet. It's past midnight. And we're like, Mom, he's 53. You don't need to wait up for him. He's a grown old man. He's almost middle-aged. So anyway, make a long story short, by the time he was leaving, he was telling us the story when he came back to California to go back to Japan. When he came back, after he was telling us day by day, blow by blow, after almost the first week, I said, Chris, just jump to the end. Tell me how the ending, the parting went. He says, oh, yeah, okay. Well, she dropped me off at Mom's house, and then as she was driving off the driveway, it's about like from here, my mom's driveway is pretty long, but from here to the exit, he was bawling. She was bawling. Then he goes running after the car and stops the car, and they hug again and kiss again, all this stuff. And, okay, we get the picture. So then that was August, and then he surprised her December, came back to America. He never did that before in December. Came back, proposed to her in December. They got married July 7th. And they just got back yesterday, because we've been seeing pictures, from Bora Bora. Have you ever been to Bora Bora? That looks like the ultimate stress relief place. But that's where they spent their honeymoon the last 2 weeks. And so now he's got a job, he's got a wife, everything is good. He's back home. We have somebody with my mom. I mean, it was providential all the way. So, he's a happy camper. And so, as we review all these things here, we covered these things. If you want the PowerPoints for these talks, and if you miss some of these days, I believe they're being all recorded right in here. So they will be up there somewhere. But these are just some of the things that we covered, and they all tie together with helping your brain to fight depression. Okay? Accountability. And let me add this, because I gave this to the people yesterday, and I know we're about ready to close here. If you need that accountability in the SMART goal is, specific, measurable, accountable, reward, or realistic, and time frame. When you make your goals, if you need that accountability, I'm here to offer you a service. We at Loma Linda have a health and coaching service, and myself, I'm a certified health and wellness coach. I'm willing and able to coach with you if you need help with an exercise plan, a sleeping, whatever lifestyle thing we talked about this week. I can be a coach via Zoom or by phone, and there's no charge, no cost to you. So you don't need a referral, you don't need insurance. You can do it with myself, or I also have graduate students that need coaching guinea pigs, if you will, for their program. So I'll find them clients. So if you want to work with me on this, just email me and we can figure out the details. But again, just like Adam did for my brother in Japan, he did it for free as faculty. We do community service. Adam did it to my brother for free for 2 years. Every week, School of Public Health, we do the same thing, at least for those of us who are coaches. So if you want somebody to help keep you accountable, keep you on track, keep you, if you need questions and you need somebody to guide you along the way, that's my email. Just contact me, and I'll do that. And one last thing that I hope you all learned from this camp meeting is that pickleball is good for your health. So if you want to come and try it at least one last time, I will be down there this afternoon, 12:30 or so. If you want to try it, that will be the last time it will be here. And then, unless you come to Filipino Camp Meeting, because it will be here again in Filipino Camp Meeting in August. But on that note, thank you very much, and God bless.